Today I'm speaking with Dr. Kath Albury from UNSW's Journalism and Media Research Centre. Kath, your research focuses on media, popular culture and sexuality, but more recently you've been looking at what's become a popular practice, sexting. Can you explain a bit about that?
Yes, sexting has had some various meanings over the years. It's a colloquial term, but currently it's used as a term to refer to the practice of taking and sending sexually explicit or sexually suggestive pictures by text message.
So there's serious legal implications for adolescents under 18 when they're engaging in the practice of sexting.
Yes, as a practice, sexting is actually quite popular with people over 18, you know, up into their 50s. But the problem for people under 18 is that any picture of a person under 18 is deemed child pornography, even if those people are over 16 and actual sexual encounters between them would be entirely legal. They can't consent to being the subject of a photograph. The law doesn't distinguish between adults who might be acting in a predatory way or might actually be engaging in child sexual abuse and are taking those photographs as part of an abuse practice, and a young person who may be taking a self-portrait or sharing that self-portrait with a partner. Because there's no consideration of consent, everyone who practices sexting who's under 18 can potentially be charged as a sex offender under child porn laws, and the penalties are really serious for that.
What are the penalties?
If young people are found guilty, they can go to jail, and they can also, you know, I think a more serious repercussion be placed on the sex offender register, which will restrict their ability to travel in the future and will restrict the kinds of jobs that they can do. And basically, if any job that would be subject to a police check, so for example coaching or working in a school, these young people would be excluded from that job, and they would always be listed as a perpetrator.
So obviously there needs to be some law reform. Is it possible to have one overarching law when there's so many different contexts in which sexting can happen?
Yes, the main focus of the research I'm working on right now is trying to develop ways of classifying the different contexts in which sexting might occur. So obviously there's a need for a legal penalty where sexting is part of bullying, or the person who's photographed doesn't know that they're being photographed or hasn't consented to the photograph being circulated. But where the photographs are being taken or being sent as part of a flirtation, and there's a clear understanding from the person being photographed and the person who has the photograph that everyone involved is happy, that should be approached in quite a different way, I think, and it should be viewed as part of a relationship. And currently the law is quite good at looking at relationships between young people and determining the power balance, and there's a lot of nuance to deal with that relationship in different ways. The sexting laws as they stand right now are just like using a sledgehammer to crack a walnut. They're too overarching.
So what does it mean at the moment, because it's illegal for adolescents to do this, in terms of how they can choose to represent themselves?
One of the issues that my colleague Kate Crawford and myself have been looking at is the way that the sexting laws actually make it illegal for a person under 18 to write about their own sexuality or to express their sexuality through images. And that's actually a restriction of their rights to self-expression. Under the UN Charter of Rights of the Child, there's a right to not just to be protected, which is really important, but also to access information and to create self-representations in a self-regarding way. So one of the things we want to look at in the sexting research is ways that we can acknowledge young people's own experiences in a legal framework.
Now obviously this is something, you know, sexting as a practice is of concern to parents and educators. Is this a case of a clash of two generations, in that the older generation find it hard to relate to sexual exhibitionism in this way?
There's a very long history of sexual exhibitionism from the time cameras and cinema cameras were invented, people were taking self-portraits. Lots of people would have taken naughty Polaroids back in the day, or even Super 8 films. I think the difference with the new technology is that the images can be distributed very easily, and that with 3G technology there can be a kind of thoughtless or unthinking distribution of images. And that's the thing that I think it's hard for some older people to get their heads around. Although I know that many educators are very aware of the context in which sexting occurs, their problem is they don't have a legal framework in which to discuss this with young people, because they're discussing a criminal act basically. So it's very hard to kind of take a harm minimisation approach in that framework.
So we've talked about how these laws came about well before we had the sorts of technologies that we have now. So what needs to happen?
Well, the laws too were never meant to apply to people under 18. There's an assumption that people who are charged with child pornography laws, under child pornography laws, are people who are over 18 and are predators, basically. So a young person is framed by these laws as both the offender and the victim in the same move. They're a victim, I guess, of their own action if they take a picture. I think that in terms of law reform and in terms of educational policy, we shouldn't be shaming young people who practice sexting, and we shouldn't be making them feel that there's something bad or wrong about wanting to experiment with their bodies and in their relationships with other people using technology, but they need to have a really clear idea of the consequences of their actions and the kind of ethics of the practices they're going into. What are kind of the ethical choices that they should be making in this relationship with another person, whether technology is involved or whether it isn't. As far as the law is concerned, I think it needs to acknowledge the context in which sexting takes place and have some nuanced way of looking at the people involved as individuals, and also a kind of the sense of the relationship that they're in. What is that relationship? If they are in a kind of flirtatious or, you know, boyfriend-girlfriend relationship, that's one issue. If, for example, people are taking pictures of their schoolmates without consent in a school locker room and then circulating it, that's a really different context, and it needs to be addressed completely differently.
Thanks for your time today, Kath.
Thank you.